myth of violence powerfully shapes our view of the world. We imagine that force must be met by a greater force if anything is to be achieved. And of course we tell ourselves that greater force is justified if it's done in the name of a greater good. Most Hollywood blockbusters follow this storyline. Take for instance the highest grossing film of all time, Avatar. Avatar tells the story of a culture clash between greedy imperialists and a nature-loving indigenous people. The natives are portrayed as very different to the mining company that seeks to exploit their natural resources. The natives are in touch with nature and live holistic lives in tune with the environment around them. So having set up this culture clash, we then move towards the resolution. And how is everything resolved? Do the natives spread their love and groovy vibes to the nasty mining executives? Do they transfer their peace with nature to a peace with the imperialists? No, the whole thing is resolved by a very loud, very lengthy, and very violent battle, with a spectacular clash of the titans and a predictably bloody finale. Might proves itself to be right. The natives beat the bad guys, but in the deepest sense, neither the natives nor the imperialists win. In the end, violence wins. The myth of violence infects everything. I had no idea how much it affected me until I visited Auschwitz a couple of years ago. As we were taken around the concentration camp, I found myself wondering how I would escape if I was an inmate, how I would overpower a guard, steal his gun, shoot my way out. It was ridiculous, and it was a hugely offensive fantasy that I held on to because it became clear as we went around the camp, if I was at Auschwitz, all that would happen is that I would die. I could not harness a greater violence to overturn the Nazis. No, life doesn't actually work like that. But Hollywood and computer games and television constantly tells me a different story. A story I fall for far more than I care to admit. I fall for these tales of heroes with bigger weapons who can outgun any problem. But I need to hear Jesus' story again because his story completely overturns the myth of violence. In John chapter 18, Jesus is on trial, and we might think that this is one more clash between powers. Facing off in this trial are contenders for the title King of the Jews. On the one hand, there's Jesus. On the other hand, there's Pilate. And briefly, there's also Herod. And the question is, who will be king? Well, we know how earthly rulers decide that question. They fight. But the trial of Jesus upends all our assumptions. Here we have Pontius Pilate, who claims to rule the Jews as the vice-regent of Rome. On the other hand, we have Jesus Christ, who claims to rule the Jews as the vice-regent of God. But as they face off, this is not simply a clash of kings. It is a clash of the kind of kingdom they rule over. So John chapter 18, verse 33. Pilate then went back inside the palace, summoned Jesus and asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" "Is that your own idea?" Jesus asked, "or did others talk to you about me?" "Am I a Jew?" Pilate replied. "It was your people and your chief priests who've handed you over to me. What is it that you've done?" Jesus said, "My kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jews. But now my kingdom is from another place." Pilate rules the way every human rules, with the sword. His servants do indeed fight for him. Pilate has the monopoly of violence in his province. He decides who can wield physical force and who cannot. If you cross him, he'll cross you. Literally. He'll line the streets with crosses if needs be. And if anyone were to overthrow his rule, it would be by bringing more earthly power. Force would unseat force. And yet, even if that occurred, there's one thing that would remain on the throne: force. But Jesus hasn't come by force to effect a slightly more benevolent reign of violence. Jesus has come to unseat violence itself. His kingdom is not of this world. The kings of this world ask their servants to fight for them. Jesus subverts this kind of kingdom. Instead of asking others to fight for him, Jesus fights for them. and the way he fights is utterly different. He conquers by losing. He ends the cycle of violence by taking the blows and not retaliating. Here is the cross-shaped revolution that Jesus brings. It is a kingdom, but not of this world. Such a reign of peace is out of this world. The Apostle Paul, reflecting on the meaning of the cross, said this, "For the foolishness of God is wiser than human wisdom, and the weakness of God is stronger than human strength." Brothers and sisters, think of what you were when you were called. Not many of you were wise by human standards. Not many were influential. Not many of you were of noble birth. But God chose the foolish things of this world to shame the wise. God chose the weak things of this world to shame the strong. God chose the lowly things of this world and the despised things and the things that are not, in order to nullify the things that are, so that no one may boast before him. How does God overcome strength? With weakness. That's what the kingdom of Christ looks like. It's absolutely counterintuitive, but 2 minutes thought reveals its wisdom. You cannot overcome power plays by a show of force. Violence is only unseated at the cross. The Lord of glory undermines all earthly glory by not retaliating. Instead, he absorbs the violence, and through the cross, Christ establishes a kingdom of servants, not fighters. We, his people, are now won by his cross, and so we are called not to kill, but to be killed if need be. Not to overpower with force, but to overwhelm with love. The spreading of Christ's reign looks completely different to the spread of any earthly kingdom. It spreads by faith and not by force, by sacrifice and not by superior strength. This is how we confound the mighty. It is the triumph of grace.